I read 54 books in 2025, but what are the best of the bunch?
I don't know.
In this video, I'm going to go over the 10 books that I love the most out of everything that I've read this year and tell you not only why I liked them, but why you may like them as well. So let me start you off with number 10. To give you some context, this is an author who I've badmouthed numerous times. I've talked smack about them. I didn't like the first book I read from them. However, I then read The Sound and the Fury and I fell in love with it. The Sound and the Fury is a novel from 1929 written by William Faulkner, who is a famously difficult writer, and this is probably his most famously difficult work. The Sound and the Fury tells a story of a young girl called Caddy and the sort of downfall of her family in the wake of her absence from it, but Caddy's perspective is never shown. So how do you tell the story of a character without including that character's perspective? So what Faulkner does is he includes 4 perspectives. But the main one, and probably the most famous one from this story, is the perspective of Benji, who is intellectually challenged. I'll use that phrase. But the way in which it was conveyed at the time was through the title, The Sound and the Fury, which for anyone who doesn't know, comes from Macbeth, a speech from Macbeth, or a soliloquy rather, in which the phrase, "Life is a tale full of sound and fury." That's not wrong. That's not wrong, that's not right. Life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
And that is what The Sound and the Fury is really all about, at least in that first section, in which we get 4 different tellings of events, all trying to get at the essence of this young girl named Caddy. And the first perspective is the perspective of the idiot that Shakespeare spoke of. The thing that's interesting about Benji's perception is that he is very much in the then and now. He can't interpret events. He can only see them and tell you what they are. So you get a very simplified, but still very visceral and moving passage. And he's very frequently howling and wailing because he cannot communicate his emotions. That's one perspective. And then the other 3 perspectives are the perspectives of Quentin, Jason and Dilsey. And these are all characters who have varying different relationships to Caddy. And the thing that's good about this is that the perspectives are very, very distinct in their voice, which is the thing that I didn't like about the work of Faulkner's that I had read, which was As I Lay Dying. Though ambitious and very compelling, the narration between the perspectives, and there's 15 perspectives, it's crazy, was not at all distinct.
What the fuck is going on here?
Whereas in this book, I felt like there was 4 strong, distinct voices, particularly Benji's. It's so difficult to get into as a reader, but once you do and you get used to its rhythms, then you're rewarded with the passages by Quentin and by Jason, which are, yes, these characters are unpleasant and vile. They're really beautifully written and so poetic. I fell in love with this book, and I'm so excited to reread it. I need to leave it some time.
Number 9.
The next book I'd like to talk about is this compact little volume here. It's a very small, tiny little pocket book. It's 23 Tales by Leo Tolstoy. This is a collection of parables, fables, and fairy tales. Very popular short stories written by Tolstoy in his life. Tolstoy had at some points rewritten or translated rather, works from the Bible, and you can tell that's his greatest influence because the way in which these are written, it's very biblical in its cadence, King James Bible sort of tone to it. What I loved about this was, yes, the variance in the stories, but also just the experience of reading it, falling into these stories, being sucked into them because of their imagery. Particular stories I really, really loved was there's a story called Two Old Men, and there's a story which is probably the most famous short story Tolstoy ever wrote, which is called How Much Land Does a Man Need? Just generally, whether you like the religious bent or not, I'm not religious myself, but I don't mind reading that type of thing. The moral lessons that are at the heart of these do make you want to be a better person, or at least did to me. I think these short stories are really great, and I will be reading his whole oeuvre of short stories over the course of my life.
And now for something completely different.
This is a very modern work. This is number 8 is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. For those of you who've either heard of or seen the Netflix movie, this is a postmodern, existential, cerebral nightmare in which the most mundane and banal thing happens. A young woman goes on a car drive to visit her boyfriend's family and have dinner with them. And that's really it. But there's so much more to it than that, and it unfolds in such a way, and there's such a gradual unfurling of something isn't quite right here. And you know that from the off, but it's such an exciting and suspenseful work, and it's really unnerving. It's that sort of thing where it's the sort of Kafkaesque, uncanny valley type thing. It's crazy how much he gets done, and the way in which you get this sort of masterclass in the unreliable narrator that you get in this book. It's a terrific story. The next author and the next work that I would like to talk about is very provocative, controversial, and autobiographical. It is Charles Bukowski's Ham on Rye. Despite being a terrible person, Bukowski holds a special place in my heart. He is the writer whose work, specifically his poetry, but also his novels Hollywood and Pulp, got me back into reading. I think Bukowski's writing is very deceptive because if you read some of his poems or you read some of his prose, you think this is incredibly simple and anyone could have written this. However, the poetry that he gets at and some of the universal truths that he gets at, it's not something that anyone can write. Ham on Rye is a very autobiographical and very personal work to Bukowski. It discusses his childhood and his adolescent years, the abuse he suffered at the hands of his father, and his difficulty in making true friends, and just the way in which he went about life growing up. It makes you feel such empathy, and you understand why he became the man that he did. It's horrible, and it all ends up in this book, and it's so beautifully rendered. Apart from another book which I'm going to talk about, which does a similar sort of evocation of childhood, this is the strongest of that I've read in quite some time. Next, in the complete contrast to Bukowski's sort of very cut and dry, gritty poetry, we have the whimsical and wonderful poetry of James Joyce, and that is this book, The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. This is an exquisite book. It's really, really wonderful, and this is a lovely Everyman edition that I found very cheap from somewhere. This book tells of the character named Stephen Dedalus, who, if you've read or heard of any of Joyce, you know that he also appears in the book Ulysses as one of the main characters there. And it tracks him from his earliest memories of infancy to late stages of adolescence. The thing that's really exciting about this, not only the fact that Joyce crafts a wonderful narrative, and he brings you into this world with such beautiful language. If I just read you the first little paragraph, just because it's so beautiful, and it makes me smile whenever I think about it. Once upon a time, and a very good time it was, there was a moo cow coming down along the road, and this moo cow that was coming down along the road met a nice little boy named Baby Tuku. I mean, just the word, and the fact is he uses these as compounds as well. Moo cow is a compound, but I just think that's such a beautiful way of describing it. It's so childlike and innocent. I think that's the beauty of it, is that Joyce not only writes about childhood, his language and the prose he uses evokes that as well. So throughout the book, as the character ages, so too the prose matures, it gets more developed. The other thing that I love about Joyce is how sensory it is. It's not only the things you see, it's the things you smell. It's how those smells affect you, how you feel about them. The way in which he's evoking memory is through familiar and nostalgic smells and feelings and sights. It's a beautiful way to do it. I really, really love this. I'd love to reread this as well, just because it's so much fun. Number 5, we're halfway through the list already, can you believe it? What's this book, you may ask? It's A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens.
I knew he wouldn't disappoint us!
A Christmas Carol is the classic tale of Scrooge, an old miser who hates Christmas. Through being shown the meaning of Christmas and the magic of Christmas upon others, through the 3 ghosts of Christmas past, present, and Christmas yet to come, his attitude has changed and he becomes a different person and a better person because of it. Everyone knows the story of A Christmas Carol. The joy in it, for someone who knows the story already, comes from reading it. I think we all know that Dickens is a quite good writer. I think we've established that over the 200 years since he started writing. I think Dickens's prose is wonderful. The way in which he writes, like Joyce, it's so sensory, it's so evocative, it's really cinematic. Fog through every chink and keyhole. These are not particularly realistic, grounded visuals, but they're so powerful in their meaning. And so too, his writing is really, really funny. And it is quintessentially English humour. It's very dry and sarcastic from time to time, but there's a great sentimentality in it that I just really, really loved. You all know A Christmas Carol, so if you have read it, you'll know it's brilliant. If you haven't read it, I'm telling you it's brilliant. Give it a read. And Merry Christmas. One of the things that Dickens has that some people may not like is his incredibly long sentences. If you think to the opening of A Tale of Two Cities, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness, yada yada yada. He goes on. In the same vein with these long sentences, my next pick is Satan Tango by Laszlo Krasznahorkai. I have owned this book for years. I bought it at uni when I first watched some of the films of Béla Tarr, who is a Hungarian filmmaker who makes these very slow, atmospheric pieces, a lot of them based off the work of Krasznahorkai. I never read it until I found out that Krasznahorkai won the Nobel Prize for Literature this year, and I finally decided it was the time to get to it, and I'm so glad I did. I had an absolutely marvellous time reading this book. In simple terms, the book tells of a collective farm which is dilapidated and stuck in its present moment. And then 2 visitors come to town. These are the elusive and mysterious Eremias and Petrina. And the main one, Eremias, has this sort of preacher-like presence there, and he sort of spins a yarn to the townspeople, and they totally believe him. They put all their hope in him, and they follow him to this manor house where he says they will have a fresh start, and it doesn't happen. Explaining it like that, you think, well, how have we got this, and what is so interesting about this? What is so interesting about this? I'm glad you asked that, let me tell you. The thing that is so interesting about Satan Tango, firstly, is its structure. Satan Tango is written, as its title suggests, as a dance. I said dance, I'm northern. It's a dance.
We love the North. It's the place to be. We love the North.
It is a tango that is one forward, one back, and it's written in two parts. And the first part, you have the first chapter. The second chapter then studies that moment in time from a different perspective. And you have 6 different perspectives in essence for the first half, and then 6 different perspectives for the second half. And it's beautifully crafted. It's so interesting. What it brings up to me is this stasis that the town is in, you are also in as the reader, because you're not moving forward. You're sort of stuck in this moment of time. You're only moving forward in the second part. So, and when they move forward, you move with them. It creates that sort of sense of being in purgatory. The other thing that is interesting about Krasznahorkai, and it's the thing that's most famous about him, are his sentences. To use the right terms, they are labyrinthine, complex, serpentine almost, in how long and snaking they are. They are incredible. The way in which he crafts these images and just piles one on top of the other, it's extraordinary. And I do want to geek out about a certain thing. There is a certain sequence that takes place in the manor when all the characters fall asleep and all have these individual dreams. And the way in which the prose is written makes it seem like you, yourself, are falling asleep and losing track of what you are reading. I was looking at the page and just thinking, am I losing my mind? What I thought it was a mistake of the writer. You get through it and you realise, no, this is totally intentional. And Krasznahorkai is evoking this half-awake state of mind, this sort of semi-consciousness. It's probably the most excited and geeky I've felt about a book in so long. I cannot stress enough how much I love this, and I cannot wait to read more of his work. Next, an absolute classic of American literature, it is John Steinbeck's East of Eden. This is a lovely edition, very short, and also very small and compact, but also I've completely worn it to shreds because I was reading it so deftly. East of Eden is a classic of American literature for a reason. It is the story of Cain and Abel across multiple generations of a family, and it is one of the most compelling and eminently readable books I've ever sat down to read. It's so engaging. Steinbeck's prose is beautiful. The story in which he is crafting, I could not stop turning the pages. It's a rare thing that happens to me where a character, I so identify with a character in that moment that I move to tears, and East of Eden has had that. There is a particular scene which takes place where 2 characters are sat in the well out of a tree and they're just talking, and it just moves me to think about it. It's such a beautiful scene. And East of Eden is full of them. By the end of this novel, you know these characters truly. You know them deeply and innately. You understand them, and even some of the most despicable characters in this, or at least the purported despicable characters, even those you identify with and you understand them. It's another one of those books where if you're on a certain sphere, you've heard about it endlessly. And I'm just adding to that by a couple of these titles I'm just going to add to that. Please, as someone who didn't read long books really up until the start of this year, it is so worth it. The joy you get in going through this book, taking your time with it, getting to know these characters, and truly picturing each and every scene to the fullest potential. It's absolutely brilliant. I think this title is maybe my favourite of the lot, and that is this enormous tome of a book. This is David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest. I'm going to be one of those people that tells you how good this book is, but I truly do believe it, and I say so with all of my heart. This is one of the best, most extraordinary, life-changing books I have ever read. For all its notoriety, Infinite Jest is telling a very down-to-earth and compelling story. It takes place in 2 main locations, which is the Ennet House, which is a halfway house for addicts, and the Enfield Tennis Academy, where young and aspiring athletes pursue excellence in the field of tennis. You follow a wide cast of characters in both locations, and all the while there is this great mystery around a tape which is called Infinite Jest, which is said to be so entertaining that when you watch it, it transports you into a state of bliss. You're just in catatonia the whole time you watch it, you're just gone. So this novel is ultimately about addiction, and that can be alcohol or drugs, it can be media and entertainment, so TV and film, which is where you get Infinite Jest from, and it can also be about the pursuit of excellence, that being these young people who are burning themselves out and doing themselves great harm in the pursuit pursuit of greatness at tennis. It's written from many, many perspectives and has various forms of writing, so it's quite experimental in how it's written. For all its stylistic and linguistic zeal, what you have is a book that will generate a tremendous amount of empathy in you. The way in which Wallace wrote about these things, you can tell he'd experienced them himself, and he had experienced them himself. He was an addict, he had issues with substances. That pain and that suffering really went into this book, and some of the passages in this are absolutely harrowing. They're just horrible to read. But the thing that helps you through is Wallace's writing. He over-explains and over-analyzes to the point where you totally get his point, but he's explained it to you 5 times already. But it's that desperation to be understood and the desire for clarity that I really saw myself identifying with, and it's what kept me through. I did not get bored the whole time reading this thing, and that's a staggering achievement considering its length. If I had my name emblazoned upon this book, I would be very, very proud of myself, and I wouldn't need to write anything else in my life. So what is the best book that I read in 2025? Good question. If you're still here, you probably want to know.
Get on with it!
Drum roll please, everybody. The best book I read in 2025. I have a lovely folio edition of it here. The eagle-eyed among you may know what it is just from that. You probably won't know. Would you know from that? Would you know from this? Would you know from that? This is The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This is the David McGarshak translation, which I have not read yet. I have a paperback, which is the Richard Pevere and Louisa Volokonsky translation, which is the one that I read and the one that I am rating as the best book that I've read in 2025. This translation I got the Folio Society copy of because I just wanted a beautiful copy of it. I was absolutely enamored with this book. I think about it to this day. To talk about it as I am going to now is tremendously exciting, and the thought of rereading it fills me with even more excitement, which I will inevitably do at one point. The Brothers Karamazov is the final novel from Fyodor Dostoevsky, one of the most famous and influential Russian writers of his time, and of all time. And this novel is his culmination of everything that he ever wanted to say, I think, and tells of the tumultuous, rather fractious relationship between Fyodor Pavlovich Karamazov, the father of the house, and his 3 sons. And it also tells of what led to his murder. It's a thing of, this is not only a family drama, it's also a mystery novel, and it's also a courtroom drama, so it's got all these different things going for it. And 2 of those things I wouldn't ever really choose to read. I don't really care for mystery novels, and I don't really care for courtroom dramas, but I was absolutely floored by how compelling this book was. I have never been so riveted by a novel and so desperate to read it to its fullest just to find out what happened than I have been with this book. I read it so quickly. I spent hours a day just poring over it, trying to get through it because I was so engaged in it and so enraptured. The thing that's extraordinary about it is not only is it never boring, which again, for a long book, the fact that it's never boring is amazing. Not only is the prose beautiful and layered, and his sentences are incredibly elaborate, but they don't lose you. This narrative, which is told in a very interesting way over a long period of time, everything pays off. I think the main thing that you've got in here is what the father-son relationship means, and what it means for the future of the country. You've got so many different patterns of fathers and their difficulties with their sons. And this is a very personal novel to Dostoevsky, who lost his son at a very young age. Dostoevsky's pain is felt throughout all this novel, and if you know that context going in, you can read some of these scenes and be so tremendously moved. I mean, you'd be moved anyway, because of the way in which he writes about grief, but my God, knowing what he went through and how he writes about it, it's all the more powerful. It's such a beautifully told tale. I've never been so excited to pick up a book as I was with this. It is a perfect novel. I could not think of a single thing that I would want to take out of it. I want to pick it up again. I've said at the moment I'd read it, I was basically like, can I go back to the start, pick this up again, reread it? And I want to do that now, but I obviously can't for self-imposed reasons. People have spoken about this book ad nauseam, and you've likely heard about it if you're in the same sort of sphere on YouTube as I am. I know I'm adding to it, but I think it's so worth it to say that The Brothers Karamazov is not only the best book I've read this year, it is likely the best book I have ever read, and I cannot implore you enough to read it. What did you think of my list? Did you think it was the best list you've ever heard? If you didn't, why not? Get off this channel if you think that. That's ridiculous. Yeah, thank you for watching again, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.